This is House Planning Help episode 176. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Today it's a case study. We love a good case study, and we're chatting to Dennis and Nicola Merrigan, having a look at their projects. Guess what we've been up to?
Watch out, you'll buy the light. Just
It's a sleeping bag, camping sleeping bag.
Droppable. Okay.
Is there actually any room down there?
Yeah, there's plenty of room yet.
Yes, we've started clearing out our attic space with a little help from my dad and also my mum, who is looking after our son while we get on with the work. It's quite satisfying, particularly when you couldn't even walk up there before, and little by little we are returning some floor space there so that the new people to live in our house will think, wow, this is a huge space, rather than this is a load of junk up here. And I feel at some point there is a podcast we could do about clearing out a house rather than it all going to landfill. How can we recycle to the best of our abilities? Kay's using these Facebook groups, the local ones, which are really good for selling things. So every 5 minutes, someone's knocking at our door saying, do you have in fact, this happened a few minutes ago. What were they after? The inflatable bed with a hole in it. That's what they wanted. So we're going through all of that at the moment. And I must commend my parents for being brilliant. They're always the best parents ever. But it's been really, really helpful. I think they've done the runs to the tip when we've needed to, because they've got the bigger car, which is obviously the short straw. Let's get to our featured interview with Dennis and Nicola Merrigan. I'd seen pictures of their self-build when it was first completed and thought, oh, I really want to go there. So I got in touch and they said, yep, that's fine. Come and check it out. However, arranging when to do this, I've no idea how long this has taken. It could have been years now. Anyway, I'm delighted to say that a couple of weeks ago, I got down there and they put me up for the night. So I actually got some sleep. My son didn't wake me up, or my heavily pregnant wife. And they even took me out for a meal at the local, and I had to stagger back the whole 30-second walk because they're right next to a pub. And so the next day I was refreshed, just ready to hear this self-build story. Den has a construction company and was the driving force behind the project. So I started by asking him when he decided he wanted to build his own house.
I had a house in Dorset which I lost through a divorce. Always wanted a house in Dorset. Always wanted a house in Dorset again. So I was looking for a plot for quite a time.
Nikki, you look like you want to say something. Don't bury your head in your hands. That's a great way to start an interview.
It probably doesn't sound like the happiest beginning to a journey. But yeah, I think Dennis had always wanted to build his own home, and he loved the county of Dorset.
And you found this plot, I would say, in quite a rapid way. Or were you searching for a while and then it just came up and you got it?
I was looking for a while, looked at a few things, didn't like them. This one came up really quickly. Literally saw it in the morning of the auction. Went to the auction. Nikki was with me. We decided what we wanted to go to. We made one bid, went to actually what we wanted to go to, and luckily enough, that was it. We got it. So it was a lucky journey, that bit. Very lucky, I think.
What were you looking for from the plot?
We wanted to be in a village with some amenities, pub, shop. We probably wanted to be nearer the coast, but Anstey's proved to be very good because you can get from Bridport to, I'd say, Poole in 40 minutes, all of it. So we don't feel we're far from the coast, so we've even bought a boat now, and we enjoy the coast quite a lot. So that hasn't proved to be a handicap, although we thought it might be at the start. We love the village, and the plot was ideal in that it's right in the centre of the village. I think it was people put off because it's at the back of the pub car park, and the other side there's a pig farm, but the pigs are a rare breed, and we've grown quite fond of them. and the pub car park gives you an interest, and we can walk straight over to the pub.
Nikki, what were you after in this new house, even down to rooms and how you're going to live in it?
In terms of what I was looking for in a house, was mostly a light, simple space. I didn't have any set idea about how many rooms. I just wanted to be a space filled with light.
It does seem to some degree that you were quite easygoing with the house, that this was going to become your home. And in some respects, I know Den has all the knowledge, but you've just let him get on with it.
Surprisingly, I think I have been quite easygoing, which is not something people know me for particularly. But I think I was quite overwhelmed and daunted by how you go about building a house. And it was so out of my comfort zone that I was very happy for Den to take the lead. Obviously, he consulted me along the way about everything, but I was very new to the building world, and I knew that some decisions were just ones that Den needed to make on his own.
Let's say you did this again, which was probably unlikely because you've got a great house here. Would you want to be more active, or would you still do exactly the same?
If we built another house, and I would say that will probably be with Den's next wife. No, I'm joking. If we did it again, I think in a way the fact that I wasn't so informed perhaps was helpful for Dennis, because sometimes you need one person to take the lead. I think if two of you are really informed, perhaps it would have made more clashes. So in a way, I think Den benefited from me being a little bit overwhelmed by the actual building process.
I've seen it happen in various different ways, and it's down to each couple. There's no right or wrong at all. It's just interesting to hear that. So,
Nikki actually did design the kitchen. That was her domain. She definitely wanted the kitchen to be a total input in the kitchen. So
I would say something, a little story about my ignorance at the beginning. I had absolutely no idea what a passive house was, never heard the word. So Dennis tried to describe it to me, and he said the word eco house. And the only time I'd ever seen an eco house was on Grand Designs in the very early days, where normally there was some kind of self-composting toilet and a really sad-looking woman putting sawdust down her toilet. And I didn't want that to be me. So I was quite adamant to Dennis that I was happy for him to take the lead, but I did need a flushing toilet.
okay.
well, that's clear. How did you go about moving things on then and deciding what size of house, what kind of house was going to go on this plot?
Well, the size of house was constrained by the planning it already had. I wanted to tweak that to maybe get a bit more out of it, but I know I couldn't go mad. The design of it was, first of all, we just went for a local vernacular red brick and stone. And the planners turned that down and said they wanted something more modern. So as soon as they said that, I'd always had in the back of my mind the passive was the way to go. And also an architect that I'd worked with previously had gone into passive house design, Paul Mallion of Conservation. And I had somebody I knew I could work with. So I got him involved. We tweaked the design, decided on timber frame, and basically went for it. Happy with his input. And we designed it between us, I'd say, and kept Nikki in the loop and tweaked it as we went.
Now, Nikki, you've said to me that you didn't enjoy actually looking at the plan. So were you able to feed back in any great way, or just go, yeah, I think that'll be okay?
I was a bit phased by looking at drawings and plans. I don't really visualise plans very well. So it wasn't until the timber frame was up and I could walk round the space, albeit no stairs, going up ladders, that I could, and the windows were in, then I really saw it, and it just worked.
What constraints were you up against on this site? Obviously, planning might be one.
We had a height restriction. That was the only thing on the second planning application. They wanted us to take the height down slightly. That wasn't a big issue, and I think they were quite right, actually. The house looks better for it. And we did have some drainage problems. The land used to get flooded from the hill behind. But our neighbour came up with a problem-solving way of overcoming that. We put a sump on his land and built a little drainage channel right through the property under the decking. And now the problem has been solved. Water goes through to the car park, whereas it used to be mud and all sorts going through. And so we haven't had a problem since that was done. But that's local knowledge, and I think it just shows if you can get on with your neighbours, and our neighbour was very helpful throughout the build, it makes a big difference.
I've been out and I've had a look at that sump, and it's actually not very big. To me, it seems to be a concrete square that then feeds it in a certain direction. So did you know that that's the point where all the water came to, and then it just started building up and up and up?
Yeah, the ditches run to that sump, and as my neighbour has, when he's redone his ditches, he's made it sure it runs to the sump. And normally, it's only when you get a downpour that this is a problem. The sump will take the water, 95% of the time, but if you get a flash rainstorm, the sump will overflow, but it just overflows now into the channel. And because it is a sump, all the soil goes to the bottom of the sump, so you're just getting water coming through now, where previously you had mud, all sorts coming through, and it used to cover the pub car park and be a real problem. So, I mean, we've got rid of a problem for the neighbour, the pub, and ourselves, so everybody's happy.
Is that something that you knew about when you first developed designs, or that when it starts to rain you think, hold on a second?
No, that was like when it starts to rain you think, oh wow, this is a bit of a problem. But then just chatting to people, and as I say, the neighbour came up with the problem-solving idea. And so, yeah.
How did you get that neighbour on side? Because as the story goes on, I know we involve the neighbour quite a lot, but your neighbour seems to be brilliant.
He's just a nice guy, and also he thinks that your home is your castle and you can do what you want on it. So he will do what he wants on his, and I will do what I want on mine. But we get on very well. He puts the bins out when we're not here. We help him take care of his pigs when he goes away on holiday. And it's become a very close relationship, and we get on with them very well. I think a lot of that is just pure luck, to be honest. And I've heard horrible stories where people don't get on with their neighbours, and it can be a real problem. But he was helpful throughout the build, and he's been helpful ever since, and hopefully we're helpful to him.
So what period of time did the build go on, and how was it from your experience? Because I know you were away a lot as well, Nikki.
Yes, I was working away, and Dennis was to a large extent working in London, so a lot of it was project managed remotely, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone. I think being near to the site that you're building a property on is really important. It had its difficulties, our build, and there were stops and starts. The biggest disappointment was that our timber frame company went into liquidation, and we'd paid 50% up front to have the timber frame to our specifications. So that was a massive blow. The site had to be closed down, the contractors all had to go away, and we were a significant amount of money down. So that meant later on, once we'd got another timber frame company and regrouped and got the builders back, we had a deficit of £20,000 at the end. So we had a lovely house that was pretty much finished, and no money for a kitchen.
Which is your big input. I mean, that's amazing. In fact, maybe you can, it's jumping ahead, but tell me how you solved that one, because that is a great kitchen you've got downstairs.
We're very lucky now to have a lovely kitchen. We were looking at all sorts of, budget options, and, we were happy with that. But Dennis, as a surveyor, works as an independent surveyor with loss adjusters on fire and flood claims. And as if the gods of building, take away and then give back, Dennis went to look at a very high-end kitchen shop that had had a flood in the basement. But they had a kitchen upstairs for display, which had kind of been written off by the loss adjusters. And Dennis phoned me rather excitedly and said, Nikki, come to Islington, come see this kitchen, because I think we can get it, and I think we might be able to afford it. So I went to Islington, It was fantastic, better than I'd ever hoped for. And now it's duly installed and we absolutely love it.
And recycling, really, that's the other great thing about it. If it's something that's been written off, my goodness, it looks pretty good quality to me.
Yeah, we were very lucky with that. And we had to redesign the kitchen because our design that we originally had didn't work. So we had to move a few electrical sockets and things. But the kitchen's fantastic. And yeah, we're very happy with it. And it's not the kitchen we would have designed, but I think it looks better than the one we would have got originally. So we're very pleased with that.
The timber frame company then going bust, I mean, is there anything you can do to protect yourself against that? Or?
Well, there is actually, and even I use this at work now. Where I've got to put hefty deposits down now, I use my personal card because that gives me insurance. And a lot of people don't realise that your Bartley card, your business Bartley card, does not give you the same insurance as one as an individual. So now, if I was paying for anything like that, I would put it through my personal account. Then I would be insured. And it's a simple thing, but you don't often think of it. So yeah, that's a learning curve, but worthwhile.
And how does this manifest itself on the site? Had you got underway with the timber frame, or was this before anything happened?
No, we were literally waiting for the timber frame should have arrived on the Monday. Everybody was here waiting for it to show up, and nothing happened. And then we're ringing them. Then you think, don't like the sound of this on the phone. You actually go down and see them. They were like 80 miles away. Drive down. You can see the guy was quite honest, to be honest. I felt quite sorry for him. He was trying to save the company. He was in trouble. And yeah, you knew he was in trouble, which subsequently meant I was in trouble. He was as helpful as he could be, actually. And he did let us take some of the materials. And he put us on to another timber frame company. So he did try to minimise the damage, and I'm in business and these things happen. So we just had to take it on the chin and make the best of it. But it was the time scale of everything, because we were like physically there the day it should have arrived, and then the blokes have got nothing to do. So luckily my builder was a friend of mine, so he rejigged things. But it still means that when you come to get going again, if he's rejigged things and he's working somewhere else, he can't just let them down. So it has a big knock-on effect. And obviously your money's dead, if you see what I mean. You can't move anything on. You're paying interest and whatever. So it has a lot of repercussions. And the deposit thing on anything now, you need to be very, very careful about.
When this was all going through, you were in London for quite a lot of the time and not able to get down to Dorset all the time. So just explain to me, the builder's a friend, that's great, but it's his first passive house, I'm assuming, as well. So how did you project manage this?
Yeah, I didn't use the architect either. The architect only visited the site once. He has since come down when it's finished, but my builder's quite technical, so he can get his head round what's required. And the architect was very helpful that he would answer any phone calls. And so the builder and the architect made many phone calls to go over details. And Andy, the builder, just took it on, and he could understand the premise behind it. I've always said, in a normal house, you've got air gaps the size of a football, and in a passive house, you're trying to achieve a golf ball size. And so every break you make in the envelope of the building has got to be sealed. You can't just run a pipe through like you'd normally do. It's got to be sealed around it. So you've got to take great care in that, and around the windows and the doors, that's all got to be sealed. You can't just fill them with foam as builders would normally do. But as long as you get the guys on your side for that, and the great thing about a passive house, at the end of it, you get an air test. And the air test tells you how many air changes you've got per hour. And in the normal house, it's like 6, 7. That would be good. And we're trying to get it down to below 0.6. And we played a little game on site that if they got it first time, there'd be a little bonus. And they did get it first time. But it also is a great way of testing that they've built it properly. I mean, if they don't get the air test right and there's loads of holes and gaps, you know that the quality of the build isn't very good. I mean, a bit late by then, but they know it as well. The builders know that. So I think the passive house system is good like that. You can't really build it badly and get past that stage because it will just show up.
Nikki, I'd like you to do something quite interesting here and just talk me through the entire build stage as you saw it. It doesn't have to be technical stuff, but I still struggle with this sometimes, and the only way that I get my head around it is by seeing it. So how would you describe from start to finish the stages that you saw? And I'm aware that obviously you weren't on site that much.
The stages that I significantly observed, so there was the first day, I remember it, July the 22nd, 2012, where we came down. It was a beautiful summer's day, and the first digger came to kind of clear the site. They had some remnants. They had a little post office on site many years ago to clear all that. And that was just a lovely day. You know, you're so full of optimism and excitement. And then the next significant one was where the sort of foundations are in, and they poured the concrete in. Is that right? Yeah, they poured all the concrete in, and that was exciting. Then the next moment for me, because I think there were big gaps for me, the next moment was that the timber frame was up and that it looked like a house. You know, you could see that a house was beginning to evolve. And we've got Siberian larch cladding. When that went on, then it looked even more like a house, and I love that Scandinavian look. It was a bit orange, though, at the beginning, our cladding, and that was a bit like, oh, and it sort of stuck out in the rural environment, and you're just thinking, oh, goodness, is this nice? And Dennis assured me that it would grey down, which it has, and now it's lovely. So, yeah, so when the cladding went up, that was significant. And then internally, as we've got Firmacell boarding, that was quite a stressful time when the Firmacell boarding went up. Dennis had decided he wanted this particular board, and the guys had never worked with it before. It's very different from plasterboard. And so that took a lot longer to get up than plasterboard would have done. And the builders weren't wholly behind Dennis. Obviously, Dennis was the main man, so they went along with it, but that took a long time. And it was a very hot summer, I remember, so it must have been 2013 when that was happening. And that was quite a difficult period again. And then it moved on quite slowly then, and really then when the kitchen went in and it was finally a home, those were the stages for me.
Interesting to see those points. Would you like to fill in any of the other details of some of the other things that were going on?
Well, it's, I suppose, sort of the solar thermal out in the PV and the roof, that was, and I very much like the look of my roof. I've designed it so it doesn't stand out, the panels and whatever. So I was
How have you done that? Well,
I've built the panels into the roof, and the panels are black. They've not got that silvery grain going through them, so they melt into the roof. And the solar thermal I bought, we've got Facro roof lights, and Facro do panels that look like roof lights, so you don't really notice them either. So that was good, and we've got aluminium guttering, which looks really nice. Those little details, it's the little details that when they're done, I think look really good. And finishing a property is all about detail. So ours is very simple in that, you know, it's just timber floors upstairs, polished concrete floors downstairs. There's no toys really. The ventilation system works really well, and we're just very pleased with it. I think you can make things too complicated and worry about heating, and we've got a log burner that works really well, and we were told we wouldn't need one. We put one in for looks really, but we do need it occasionally when we haven't been in the house for a while, and that works really well, and we're glad we put it in. But our bills, and that's what really chuffs me, you get a nice feeling when your bills come in, how low they are, and basically you've got no bills because we get the money back on the PV. So, you know, you've got a lovely warm house and no bills. That's a really nice feeling.
And Nikki, you have become a passive house advocate, really. So how has that changed, or when did it strike you?
I became more involved as the build progressed, and my work commitments elsewhere decreased, and I started to work more with Dennis. And I just loved the whole story of Passive House. You know, I learnt about Dr. Wolfgang Feist and how he developed the sort of Passive House standard, and I just became really interested and started to look on Twitter and see other self-builders, and it just really captured my interest. I like the narrative, the whole narrative of the Passive House story. I love stories, so even though it's something I'd never heard of before, I just thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to, you know, learn more.
What's been the biggest challenge on this project, if we haven't mentioned it already?
I think it really was the timber frame. You know, that was a real fly in the ointment, if you like. And just getting around that is good. And I think once you do get around things and overcome problems, then other problems that come up are very minor, and you sort of get hardened to it. So if I was doing another one again, I don't think I'd be fazed by anything, really. I do take my own advice and pay everything on the cards. And, you know, yeah, it toughens you up, and I think, and have a contingency. That's the only thing. Don't be running always up against trying to get money and worrying about money. Money can be a big worry if you're not used to these things. And I think for people who are not used to building, to go in without the project fully resourced is a nightmare, to be honest.
How do you stick to your budget?
Well, it's hard to put a budget up initially anyway. Even my friend who was a builder wouldn't do it on a price because he said, I've never done Passive House. I don't know what it involves. So we came to an agreement. So I was basically paying the labour on day to day and hoping for the best, but that makes it difficult to manage your budget. Suppliers, you know, the big things like windows and that, I knew those prices. For instance, as Nikki said, the firm cell took a lot longer to put out. It's very heavy, and it took a lot longer than, say, plasterboard would have, and that cost a lot more. So even though I'm dealing with it all the time, you know, you do make mistakes. But we did have, I know we couldn't pay for the kitchen at the end, but basically we did have enough resources to finish the project, and we managed the kitchen. We just had to wait a little time. But to be under-resourced is a nightmare. It really is, I think. So, you know, make sure of your budget and make sure that you've got a little bit left back, because things will happen and some costs will be more than you think.
And landscaping is something that you were particularly keen on, and I know it just probably continues developing the garden. So what have you done so far, Nikki?
Well, what I realised was that we'd not really got anything, we hadn't budgeted for the garden. And the cost of landscaping a garden, which is never a piece of land which once the builders have gone and you've got your lovely house, is just rubble and mud and discarded things. It was quite a large piece of garden to budget for, and we hadn't. And we got some local landscapers in to budget, and the quotes were so high. We were, it was, you know, quite frightening, really. So I would say, you know, always think about not just the house, but the surrounding area that you've got. Whatever size it is, you'll need to budget for that. Because the digger had to come in, there was landscaping, we used some sleepers, and kept it very simple. And again, the hero of the story is our lovely neighbour who said that he'd do it for us because he had a digger, and he did it sort of as and when, and it's come together really nicely. But yes, it's frightening how much plants cost.
You've been in the house a good time now. You've had lots of visitors. So what's it like to live in? What's it like when people come round?
Well, obviously, because we built it ourselves, you know, we're really, really proud of the finished product. And it's really joyful when, when our grown-up children came for the first time to see it finished. They hadn't come during the build, and we preferred it that way. Den really wanted them to come when it was finished. And, seeing their faces, obviously they'd seen photographs along the way, but when they came, we felt quite chuffed with ourselves. And I think they were really proud of us for doing it, They were really proud and quite impressed that we built the house, and they just think it's a lovely space to stay in.
And finally, Den, what advice would you have for people wanting to build their own home?
Well, obviously, the stages really are getting your land. Getting your land is probably the hardest bit. That's the bit we were luckiest in, I think. But getting the land is really hard. I know people have been looking for ages. It's really difficult to get your land. Once you've got your land, you need a good architect, and you need an architect that you get on with. Then you've got your design, which you can do between you. Then you've got to get your money in place. As I don't know if I mentioned, we use the Ecological Building Society. We're very helpful, very good all the way through the build. Couldn't fault them. So that was it. Then, obviously, getting it done is difficult, and you've got to think of the form of contract that you're going to do, whether you're going to get somebody to do the whole thing, or you're going to do it, manage it yourself or whatever, do it like we did. And also, especially with a passive house, makes you get all the detail done before you start, because you can't change things easily, not on the envelope of the building, and even the structure inside, that can't be changed. You can't suddenly decide, I want to move stuff. You've got the ventilation going through as well. So you've got to get everything detailed before you start, and then away you go. And then you've got the problem with the builds, and everybody will have a different problem with the build itself. But they're to overcome, and it is a very nice feeling at the end of it. You forget all the problems all the way through. You do forget it. It just becomes like any other problems you've had in your life. But you're in the house the whole time, and you benefit from it, and you're very pleased with yourself in a funny sort of way. So it's worth doing. I'd recommend it, but you need to know what you're taking on.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and for letting me stay.
Pleasure.
Den and Nikki, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Yeah, pleasure, Ben. Nice to meet you.
With each interview, we put together show notes, and today you can check them out at houseplanninghelp.com/176. You can review the main information, check out some photos from the build, and also if you have a comment or you'd like to ask a question, scroll down to the bottom of the show notes. We'll link you across to Mint Construction, to Conquer Conservation, and Nikki's very active on Twitter, so we'll point you to her as well, houseplanninghelp.com/176. Couple of things to mention before I finish up today. The first of which is I'm giving a new talk at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre on the 19th and 20th of May 2017. And this is very exciting because I've just been through the process of designing a passive house with my architecture firm Parsons and Whitley. So I've got lots of new things that I want to share with you. So if you can make it along to that, they hold shows every few months actually, and they're always very good. If you're starting out just in those early days, well, this could be perfect for you. So we'll give you all the details. houseplanninghelp.com/events. If it's come and gone, there will be the next thing that we're getting involved with. So still come and take a look. houseplanninghelp.com/events. My call to action today is to check out our free Eco Design 101 course. We've talked a little bit about Passive House today, and just at the end there as well with the session I'll be giving at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre. So if you're new and you're coming into this, 5 years I've been doing this very nearly, and so I want to share the top resources and top learning points with you, and that's in our 10-day e-course. So houseplanninghelp.com/tips if you haven't been through that. Hopefully you'll really enjoy it. For feedback, if you don't, tell me why. Next time, architect Ruth Butler is my guest as we discuss some of the challenges of redeveloping brownfield land and look at how she's breathed new life into a heavily constrained urban plot. That's your lot. Thank you so much for being there. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.